Today what I want to work on is doing a cloud where, or clouds, where we paint the sky down to the top of the billowing clouds and then come back in with a clean, soft cloth and lift these clouds back out of here. And then we'll come in and start painting some of the yellows and other shades in here. The colors that I've mixed up, I have 2 batches of blue mixed up here. This is ultramarine blue with phthalo blue mixed in it. This is cobalt blue with phthalo mixed in it. And the reason I have the 2 different ones is the cobalt blue is not as dark as the ultramarine blue, and I want to be able to get this dark sky that's up at the top of this, and I can't do that with cobalt blue. So I'm gonna start with a little bit lighter color and then bring that darker into it. Flat brush to start with. I'm gonna have to come back in with a round brush to get the details against that cloud, but I think we're gonna be able to do a pretty nice job with this flat brush. So this is going on thinner than what the final sky is going to be. I'm wetting the surface here, and I want to get my brush marks going all the way across so that I don't have stop and start marks on here, because otherwise I will. Just bring that in as close to the clouds as I can without having the edges sort of ugly. Okay, now I need to move fairly quickly on this because I don't want it to start drying on me before I can get everything done. So now I'm going to come in with my ultramarine blue and starting at the top here, just feeding it in, and as soon as it feels like the brush is not putting as dark a paint on, I'm dipping in and getting some more paint. So get it all the way out to those sides, stop and work my way across, and then as I hit this cloud, I want to start painting the shape of that cloud. Get more of this big area painted, and I should have mixed up more paint, but this is going to go thinner down in here anyway, so that's okay. More of this dark, and let's just go a little more ultramarine up here at the very top, get that a little bit darker, and I want to come in and start finding these edges here. And let's go ahead and get into that little bit lighter paint. Find these edges. Some drawing, but you know, I never did draw to the lines in my coloring book, and I still don't, so I guess that's just part of the way I am. They're a guide to give me an idea, but when I actually get to doing the painting itself, quite often you'll have a little inspiration or a little feeling that something should be different, and that is the way you should let it be, because after all, we are artists, and as artists we're constantly creating and changing. Now, before any of this dries too much, I need to come in and start doing the lifting on these other clouds. Clean, dry rag, and I'm pressing pretty hard. Now, I might come back in later with Mr. Clean Magic Eraser and do even a little more lifting in these clouds. If I do it lightly, and I am going to do it lightly in a few places, you get this sort of soft, misty look on these pieces. And so you can do little bits, you can do lots of bits, you can really press on some of this, and just don't overdo it, because you want clouds up in there, but not necessarily 50 million clouds. And then I can't touch it. I need to leave that, let it be. Now let's come back in, and I can do a little bit down here in this bottom corner where we have some more blue coming in underneath of these clouds. We have trees on top of the rest of those clouds. If I wanted to, I can invent something down underneath of there. There's a dark cloud there. I'm going to let that blue just go up and onto that dark cloud. And let's just let that come in, and maybe I need to soften the edge of this just a little bit with my rag. does work pretty nicely to do that. Okay. Shall we? Shall we split and break some of this just for the fun of it? And I'm going to get this little bit of heavy paint right here out of there. Maybe even roll it back just a little bit. I'm going to let it sit here upside down so that paint will tend to run up this way just a little bit for a few minutes here. And then the paint was a little bit thinner there, so you can see it's pushing the paint off, but I don't really mind that too much. It's coming up into these corners, which is fine. Okay, don't touch it, Margaret. Just get out of there. Time to let it dry, and then we'll come back and work on it after it's totally dry. All right. Okay, so I did the sky on this earlier. Remember, we lifted these out with a dry, soft rag. And now I need to put a little bit of yellow on, but I also am feeling like maybe these should go even a little bit lighter. And the only way to do that effectively is Mr. Clean Magic Eraser, the melamine sponge. So let's come in and do a little bit of that before I do anything else. So just sort of getting the center of these and working them a little bit more. I need to rub on this relatively hard to get it to lift up enough. I don't want to go all the way out to the edges because otherwise I'm going to smudge it. And the edges are softer anyway, so it's just the center that needed to get lighter. Oh, that looks better, doesn't it? And then let's try this other one over here. And I don't know if I can get anything on these little guys or not. This one here. We still want soft edges, so I don't want to do this with a stencil, because if I do it with a stencil, I'll get a hard edge around the stencil. So we can get just a little bit off the center of that guy. And now I feel like I want to get a little softer. Let me see if I can just do this with a brush and just rub some spaces here that maybe look a little more natural. And pull a little out. Okay. And we could do a little more down this way. Just this little bit of lifting. So once your paint is completely dry, and this is ultramarine blue, so it lifts a little easier than it would if it was something like phthalo blue, which is a little more staining. And I also feel like I want to get this a little bit lighter over in here at the very bottom edge, and hopefully I can get that blue back off of the, just pull this in. Better. Just want to get that a little bit lighter feeling down there. Okay, so now that I've done that much, now we can start getting into adding some yellow to this. And it's not a really big area, so I'll go with my medium-sized brush. New Gamboge yellow, thin down a lot. I want it almost white. I'm going to put it down, and then I'm going to have to thin it even a little bit more. So I'm just putting this in around these edges. And I hope the cat doesn't come and try and get into what I'm doing, because she's come to visit. So the yellow around those edges. Nice. And oh, just a hint of yellow up here where and I want to soften the edges of that. Pull maybe a little bit off. It's going to go gray back in underneath of here, so the yellow can go right in underneath of all that gray area if I want. And a little more down in here. leave a few white places. You stay cat over there. Don't you come into what I'm doing. All right, now a little touch of pink in here. Not very much, and that's a little too much, so I've got to thin that down a little, pull it into where that gray is going to be. Thin it, thin it, thin it. Don't want that too intense, but I want just that hint of pink in there. And it's going to go in underneath of where the gray will go. And now a little bit in here. And just a hint around on some of these clouds. Let's thin that out a little more. Don't want that pink too intense or it'll overpower. Okay, I think we've about got that. And now this is going to have to dry before I put the gray in on top of it. So I'm going to go ahead and turn this off and let that dry. So this is dry now, and I had put on some yellow and some pink, which is the quinacridone rose, and now we're going to start building the grays in here. So I have a gray that is leaning a little bit toward the brown side, so it's ultramarine blue and burnt sienna, with a little more burnt sienna than ultramarine blue to make it slightly brown, and a second mixture that is the same mixture but the opposite way, so more blue, less brown. And then I have a little bit over here that is a phthalo. I don't know if I'm going to want to use it. It's a greenish color. When we get to doing those dark trees, it's possible I want to use it for that. So we've got that sitting there in case we need it. Let me start with the little bit more brownish color, and we'll find the edges. I'm going to come a little bit away from where these clouds are with not as thick as a color, and then we're going to pull it up into there, and then I'll come back in and do some more dark. But I have to be careful about doing too much at once, because if I do, then I won't be able to soften those edges, and we need to soften most of those edges. Some of them can stay a little bit, but most of this needs to soften. So now I'm going to come in with a halfway dry brush, grab the edge of that, pull it up, soften it. I don't want to take it all the way to that edge because I want those whites to show. So it's going to stop just a little short of that edge. As soon as I feel like my brush is no longer making a nice clean mark, I need to go and rinse it. And I need to come in and take some of this out because it was getting a little too dark. And then let me do the underside of this. I'm going to drag that on down into where it's going darker gray. Actually, we can go ahead and put some more of this in there. Pull that right on down in. And then we have a soft little edge down here at the bottom that is not going to be white. Get that a little darker, a little thicker. And then it's going to soften out on this bottom side. Finding its way into these. Maybe a little more yellow in here. A little peachy color, not yellow, yellow. Oops. Too pink. Oh, that's better. Make it slightly orangey. Be careful about having that too dark or too light. Now I'm going to come in with even darker for in the middle of this. So this is going to go even darker in here. So while it's still wet, this dark is going to just sort of blend out up in here. And I'm not going to take it all the way to the edges. I'm going to just let it be a little short. And I love what's happening with this starting to blend out into some of what I have there. It's the nice thing about coming in with a little thicker, darker paint. And maybe I can even come in with a little more of the brownish tone. Let that work in through there, and then yes, this feels like it needs to maybe not be quite that dark. Thin it down just a little bit, pick it up with my brush, Soften that, just let that mid-tone come down into there. And just find the bottom edge of that softly, softly, softly. A little bit darker there, and then coming into this other lighter area underneath of that cloud. I want to soften these edges, they're a little too dry. And there's some light in there. Don't make that too dark down there, Margaret, because that is a fair amount of light down there. Liking what's happening here, but I do want to soften that up into this, and this edge started really drying on me. Now this is another one where we're getting back into that sort of peachy yellow tone on the edge of this. So let's find some of that in my pan and work it across and through here. Still gray, but it's a lighter, sweeter tone. And then work this a little bit darker right across through there. And we can't, there's trees back behind this, so we can't really see it for sure, but I'm gonna just put some in there. And then let's soften the edge of this, coming back with quinacridone rose and new gamboge to make a yellow gray. And a little bit on this side. These neutrals that seem like they're going to be just dreadfully ugly colors actually look quite nice when you get them against one of these darks. So it's a neutral grayed down color. And I want this uneven. I want some of it to maybe lighten that down in there a little further, and then take that up into that piece a little bit. And down in here, we want this a little softer. And then let's just darken that corner down there. Let this be a little darker right there. So you get this dark underside to the clouds. And then we want just a little touch of gray up in here, not a lot. And those are going to be mostly white. Just a little bit to give them a little more depth, a little more variation in what they're doing. Leave that alone. And I should step away from that and leave that alone. I think there's a little more, maybe there's some gray clouds that are running down in underneath here that are coming up into that can be part of that. And then I think we are going to leave this alone. Sort of sweet, sort of nice, didn't take a whole lot. I know the temptation is to touch it again, Margaret, but be careful. Dry that brush 3/4 of the way, most of the way before you come in and do that. I'm just feeling like it needs to go a little bit lighter here, but if I come in with too wet of a brush, and I maybe even need to just do this with a dry rag, because it's going to start pushing water down into that if I'm not careful. It just felt like it needed to go a little lighter on top of there. Yeah, that dry rag is actually working better because that takes it off and keeps it from causing a puddle of water to blossom down into that dark. So leave it alone now, right, Margaret? Leave it alone, leave it alone. Okay, we're going to do one more little lift just because there's a prettiness that I like. And let's see if we can do this. So this was like lifting out those other clouds up there. We're just lifting a little bit out of this dark, but I've got to be careful not to do too much of it. And did we feel like that got a little too dark there? Yeah, this rag can bring that and lighten that a little bit. And then, you know, when the trees come back in on top of that, if we put them in, it'll cover most of that. And I see one other thing that, let's just put a little bit of water on here, and then take my rag in here and rub on this. That area was feeling too hard and dry. Okay, is that better? And maybe a little more light. It's just slightly damp. I can still get a little bit, but okay, stop, 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 stop.